Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Join hosts Dan Melnick and Qasim Masood as they explore big ideas, limitless possibilities, and engage with visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who dare to dream big, get inspired, motivated, and find practical tips for personal growth. Think big, dream bigger, and ignite your potential.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Guest today, Evan Delahanty. Evan, please tell us where you're calling in from and what you do for a living with Peaceful Fruits.
Yeah, hey Matt, thanks for having us here. I am obviously calling in from my mobile office, so to speak. It's a busy day running between production and the warehouse, but pulled over for a few to chat with you. So yeah, Chief Everything Officer of Peaceful Fruits over here. When you're a little guy trying to grow, you just end up doing whatever needs done. So CEO, but a little bit of everything some days.
That's awesome, man. I like that definition of CEO because I feel like most people's actual experience with a growing brand like yours. So, so
Yep.
Peaceful Fruits, super cool. I was taking a look at it. I've been having so many conversations lately around this kind of upcycling idea, everything from CPG brands to even clothing, talking about upcycling. I think it's a really great definition to what has become super vague and like sustainable things it doesn't really have a clear definition. I think that people don't really like understand what that means fully, or it's not clearly defined. So can you tell me a little bit about your background, how you got into this space, and what drove you to want to create a kind of upcycled food brand like this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started Peaceful Fruits after serving as a Peace Corps volunteer in the Amazon rainforest. So
Cool.
for me, it was really, I was in corporate before. I'd done some business school, but ultimately I decided to do Peace Corps instead of finishing my MBA. It's 2 years where you don't make any money and you invest in yourself personally and professionally. But, MBA puts you on a slightly different path from Peace Corps, of course, but, similar opportunity cost in that sense. Well, a lot less debt on an MBA, actually, I guess, compared to Peace Corps is a little cheaper in that sense. But anyway, so put me on that path, out of corporate, more into the mission-based world. And when I came back from that, I really wanted to maintain the connection to Mother Nature, to meeting folks where they were and creating helpful, sustainable, respectful economic empowerment. And so that's where I set out to build a company that kind of met those values, right? Like I 100% believe in the profit motive. I think, capitalism, it ain't perfect, but it's the best system we got. So I think that's an important way to capture and to motivate people, but at the same time, doing that while taking care of your stakeholders, taking care of the environment is so critical to the way that I want to do business and the way I want to live my life, and the kind of companies that I want to invest in personally and professionally. So with that in mind, I set out to start a business that fit those values, for profit, but also mission based around empowerment and sustainability. So yeah, kind of backed into making fruit snacks. It's not like it's my grandma's secret recipe. I always dreamed of being the fruit snack king of the world. It's just from my network there in the Amazon. I was connected to folks with some awesome fruit, and I wanted to, that was one of the avenues that I decided to pursue. And I saw an opportunity to make fruit snacks. Hear me out on this. Out of real fruit. Crazy, I know.
Crazy idea, I know.
Yep. So that's how we started, was using the Amazon fruits, especially like acai, mango, passion fruit, to make real fruit snacks, and then just keep on chugging from there while keeping that mission, those values inherent ever since day one. So it's always been about connecting people back to the farmers, back to the people, using sustainable fruit to create sustainable products. And I mean, puree. The fruits that get pureed are the ones that aren't pretty enough to go to the grocery store shelves in many cases. And, so that's just a core part of what we do right from the beginning. And then even taking it one step further, one of our, best-selling products now is internally upcycled, where we take the trimmings, the uglies, the broken bits from the production process. And just because, the shape got a little bit, nicked or whatever on the machine, still delicious, healthy, beautiful fruit snack. So we love to be able to repurpose those things to keep sharing the love and sharing the good nutrition and the flavor and everything else.
That's awesome, man. I love that. And yeah, it's so fascinating thinking about mission based marketing for in a for-profit company rather than maybe like for a nonprofit or something. Because I think what it does more than anything else is, I mean, obviously, you know, when you have the capital, you can always do more. And that's obviously an issue like a lot of nonprofits face is like they just can't get the funding all the time to put out the proper messaging or reach as wide of an audience. And but I think another thing what it does when people, you know, start companies and are doing things like you are, I think it opens the door for other people to understand like, no, it actually is possible. We don't need to cut the corners. We can do things the right way and still have a profitable and successful business. It reminds me of I don't know if you remember Misfit Marketplace that was actually like sending like the, you know, like slightly
Yep.
maybe just not grocery store shelf quality
They're
or
a great customer of ours. Yep.
yeah. So I think yeah, I think that kind of like I think that like that company opened the door a lot for people to kind of just like get into thinking like, oh, people are actually willing to buy this stuff itself. I mean, to make something out of it is like you can't even tell where it's coming from, and it's
Absolutely.
sustainable. So, no, it's so cool. And upcycling, as I mentioned to you right before we got on here, is it's been such a big topic of conversation around everything from even apparel brands. I mean, you know, upcycling from you know, making shoes and shirts, and you know, obviously in food as well as is probably one of the biggest. But I think it's really
Mhm.
important, you know, for people to have conversations like this so people can understand what upcycling really means, to have like a clear identifier when you see something like upcycling on a package, what it really means rather than just a, you know, blanket statement like, oh, it's sustainable. Like what does that mean? I don't know. Like you have solar at your factory, like that's that like it could mean something as simple as that. Like nobody really knows, right? So but yeah, I guess I'm curious, can you expand a little more on, you know, some of your like background processes that go into, you know, making the products like you have? Where are you actually sourcing them from? I know you mentioned they're obviously, you know, sustainably and ethically sourced, as well as, you know, upcycling obviously is sustainable in and of itself. But could you tell me a little bit more about your background process and the partners that you work with to actually get the ingredients to make these things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we work with a variety of fruit processors, you know, from vertically integrated folks that are, you know, connected directly to the farmer, to, you know, some where they're processing it for us. So just it's a little bit up and down the chain, as you might imagine, you know. But what we like to do is we try to be as close to the farmer as we can. And you know, ideally, like with our acai, for example, you know, I know the processor, I know the region, I know the area. You know, we know that it's being harvested the right way. You know, wild harvested acai, creating a sustainable wage for the family farmers that are planting it and harvesting it and processing it. So you know, you want to get as deep into that supply chain as you can to create you know, the right type of supply chain. And other things, let's be honest, you know, strawberries are a commodity, apples are a commodity. There's only so, you know, you want to do as much you can to make sure you're not contributing to the problem and doing and getting things the right way. But you know, I will not sit here and say I know the name of every you know, strawberry farmer that we buy from.
Right.
But as much as we can, we make sure that folks have the right certifications, that they're doing things right, and where we can, yeah, absolutely, we go all the way back. You know, like our banana, we buy that, we know exactly who we're getting it from, we know exactly how it's made. You know, even though banana can be a commodity, that's one where, because it can go so wrong, we've taken that time to really make sure it's being done right before we use it.
Now, let me know too. I guess I'm just curious. I mean, when you go to work with somebody who's producing, you know, anything that go into making these fruit snacks, is this like a side of their kind of business as farmers that they like, you know, offer up to have these like kind of opportunities and upcycling and you know, maybe things that they know they're not going to be able to sell to like a grocery store chain or something? Is that something that they have like kind of open into the market, or are those conversations that like you kind of open up with farmers? To kind of get into like, you know, what they maybe ordinarily would go to waste or they would do something else with. How does that kind of look from like when you have a conversation with a farmer? Do you ask them about it, or do they usually have something already in place for, you know, sourcing from this side of things?
Yeah, I mean, we're still a little guy, right? I don't want
Hmm.
to mislead anybody, right? So you know, we're not yet in a position where we can go to a farmer and say, you know, hey, I'm going to buy 100% of the mangoes that you harvested this year, you know, pretty or ugly, and I'm going to make sure that none of that goes to waste and it all gets turned.
Hey, Evan, can you hear me?
Hmm. Can you hear me?
Yep, I think we're good now. Yeah, don't worry,
Oh,
we'll
strange.
we'll cut it up. It'll make it look good. So yeah, sorry. Go
Cool.
ahead. I guess I'm just more
Uh,
curious. Like, Like do farmers seem to already have things in place, like to, like source for people who want to do, more of an upcycling model than just like, buying direct, like whatever they would usually sell to like a grocery store? Or like what is like the kind of vibe you get when you speak to people? Like are people seem to be like already very open up to this idea? They're already sourcing kind of like that, that side of things that you're intaking to create your product? Or
Well, I mean, most of the people that we're talking to are thinking about sustainability, right? And
mm-hmm.
maybe that's just the subset that we talk to. We obviously are looking for companies that have organic certifications, that have fair
Right.
trade certifications, that have B Corp. We're a certified B Corp, so we always love working with other certified B Corps. So in our slightly smaller pool, a lot of folks are thinking about this that way. And the reality is, I mean, puree is a there's a lot of people turning fruit into puree up and down the value stream. So, this is a known way to take product that isn't going to end up in a grocery store. So, people have been doing it for decades, hundreds of years just to make money, So it doesn't need to be like, rescued fruit from the waste pile. Sometimes you can do that as well, but even so, right? Like it's just a good way to turn fruit into product, into cash. So it's good for everybody.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I guess just hopping kind of on the the business side of things. So when you started this brand, when you launched initially, did you launch straight online right away, or did you already have some kind of partner set up as far as like retailers that you sold to? And how did you kind of get the start with this product? And also, like, tell me kind of how it exists, more now. Are you doing a lot of wholesale sales, selling it out of stores? Are you doing mostly D2C? What does your kind of breakdown of your revenue streams look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we started, I mean, I'm a Midwesterner, right? I'm here in the heartland in Northeast Ohio. And so I started doing this, in just trialing it out in farmers markets. That's how I started. Um, and not intending to, build a farmers market brand. That was never the goal. We wanted to build a national brand. But that's how we started out, just researching, trying, learning, was that direct interaction with consumers to figure out what worked. And then from there, yeah, we launched online and we launched into sort of the local natural foods, and just built little bit by little bit from there into, more mainstream grocery. So for us, it's always been uh, focused on the retail play. We do sell, of course, D2C, website, Amazon, because why not, right? The margin is good, and you need a chance to communicate that story. But we do our own manufacturing, and the type of manufacturing that we do is pretty unique, and that means that in order to create, build, invest in the equipment to do the unique things that we do, we need a little bit of scale. So to start making a product, to put out 100 of them for a farmer's market just isn't economically feasible, right? We need to know that we're going to be able to sell 10,000 of these to the local grocery store chain, or a regional chain or whatever, to make sure that it's economically viable. So
That definitely makes sense. And I'm always curious because it seems like this is such a big area of variability, especially with CPG brands, just because there's so many. How do you kind of start these conversations with these retailers or distributors that you work with? I mean, has anybody reached out to you, or are you kind of doing like some cold outreach on your own to try to like, spread the word out there with distributors and grocers and things like that? What has your kind of experience been with that, with getting into those kinds of stores?
yeah, it's all of the above, right? And I mean, it is just a ton of work. You'd be surprised. Like, yeah, we'll get, we've got some great earned media over the years. We were on Shark Tank, for example, which obviously was a huge spike of publicity. And so, yeah, you get a lot of people reaching out, right? Like Trader Joe's calls you and is like, "Hey, this is cool. Should you be in Trader Joe's?" Like, they have no idea how big you are, what size you're at, are you appropriate? But they saw you on Shark Tank and they want to chat. So cool, take the call, right? And then all other times, it's like any other sales funnel, right? It's a ton of cold emails, a ton of follow-ups, a ton of cold calls, stalking people on LinkedIn, just the good old grind that anybody in any type of sales knows. You got to
Hmm.
track somebody down. And even if they want to talk to you, you still got to email them 16 times just to, and then they say like, okay, yeah, I want to do this. Like, cool. Are you going to place an order? Oh yeah, I'm definitely going to place an order. Okay. When are you going to place your, what are you going to, so it's just the normal funnel. I mean, we work with brokers, we work with distributors, we go direct. It's just really a patchwork of whatever it takes with these different folks. But it's important to know what stage and what size customers are appropriate for you. It's easy sometimes to get into these distributors, right? Because they're always looking for the next new brand, new thing. But often it's a mistake to go into those distributors too early before you have the stores, before you have the pull to make sure that you're actually moving and hitting those velocity targets. So, for us, we try to always work with retailers, get some excitement, get some people interested, and then turn around and say, okay, how do you want to buy this from us, right? Do you want to buy it direct and we're going to ship it to your warehouse? Or do you want to buy it through KeHE, which, is our main natural foods distributor? You want to buy it through them, in which case we're already selling, we've got 10 other chains that want to buy it through KeHE. Okay, now we call KeHE and say, hey, 10 stores, 10 chains want to be buying us from you. Let's get in your warehouses. But now I actually have some negotiating power. I actually have some, a conversation instead of just, oh, hey, distributor, you want me, I want you, great. And then it sits there and you get screwed on the velocity, right? So that's been our approach.
Yeah, I think it's a really healthy perspective looking at it that way, because I have heard a lot of stories from other people, either come on the podcast or just in conversations, that say, they just got too big into like selling straight to distributors right away, and it just all fell apart, and then their reputation was kind of botched, in those spaces. So I think you have a good, just kind of like slow burn, like, make sure you're growing organically in the right ways like that, thinking on the wholesale side. So I appreciate that. It's good advice. I think anybody listening, that's in CPG and trying to do something similar, I think it's a good route to take, to not put all your eggs in one basket, but also just don't like go too hard in just one, avenue for, right at first. Cause, if it doesn't go perfectly, it can be, disastrous for the other relationships that you're trying to forge out there. So, no, I definitely appreciate that. And, I want to ask you too. So obviously, you do your own manufacturing, and, which is often the case with, different types of brands that are doing things. So kind of like these novel processes that go into making something like this. So in that way, I mean, have you been approached with any private labeling opportunities, and have you done anything like that since you started? This is obviously, you own your process. You're doing something pretty unique in this way. So have you taken advantage of any of those types of opportunities, or has anybody approached you with anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. We've done a little bit there. So we've worked with a couple of smaller, like nutraceutical opportunities where, because our approach is a lot more gentle and less processed than, somebody that's just pumping out gummy bears or, the high sugar, fruit snacks. So we are much more healthy and appropriate for those types of things. So we've done some small white labeling and R&D projects for those types of guys. And we have looked at and are in discussion for some larger white label opportunities. It's always a trade-off, right? As a small company, where on the one hand, funding manufacturing, funding growth, cash flow is cash flow, right? You can't beat it. But on the other side, we are trying to build a national brand, and every dollar that's spent, every unit of capacity that's spent making, a Good and Gather branded item instead of a Peaceful Fruits branded item, that's just direct competition. So that's something that we look at very much case by case, and we have not yet launched any significant white label projects, but it's something that we're constantly evaluating, and there are a couple that are marinating right now that we may pull the trigger on, if we can get to good terms. So we'll see. We'll see is the answer, right? It's you can't beat having some scale to help push your manufacturing, but you got to protect the brand.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It's such an important thing to contemplate, and I don't think there is a right answer. I mean, for every single case, obviously there isn't. But there's definitely something I hear kind of similar. Is like, well, like we're trying to build something here, and the capacity, just like our capacity doesn't really allow us to do this. And like, if we did 50% of our revenue through this, like we would just be shooting ourselves in the foot. But maybe a little, 5 to 10, little, kicker with maybe some smaller stuff is kind of okay. It's just funny. People seem to have very differing opinions, and I think a lot of people just kind of have, especially in the early stages of a brand, when it's like a real passion project, I think people just don't want to like, let the secret out, or, they're with their ingredients or the way that they're doing things to anybody through, private labeling, or either even like co-packers or like, outside manufacturers. People can be a little bit, skeptical with that, rightfully so. But I think it's a good point, is, you just need to kind of take it on a case by case basis, and just like, just be, contemplate those things. Don't just take it as like, oh, it's cash flow. Yeah, let's do it. I mean, there's probably other ramifications. So I think that insight
absolutely.
is valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, just to put a cherry on that, I mean, for us, like it comes down, when you do your own manufacturing, it comes down to scale, to cash flow, to margins. But you have to think about the low hanging fruit, right? So even if you can do 100,000 in business, but it's at 20% margin instead of 50,000 in business at 40% margin, you got to think about what's going to have both short and long-term ramifications. And so for us, we just are checking that decision each and every time.
Yeah, I think that's a good perspective on that. And even if it's not maybe a good fit at the right time, like, but if somebody approaches you to that, maybe you just realize, okay, this is something we could do if things ever get strapped, or you just really need like an extra revenue stream at some point down the line. At least you know that that's there, and you're making connections even in just having those conversations. So no, I think it's a good point. And so let me ask you a couple last things. Just I guess I'm just curious. I mean, fruit snacks is always kind of, it's obviously usually pretty, youth forward with the kind of customer base, or like the consumer, I guess you can call, like, your 6-year-olds who love their fruit snacks. Is that kind of what you find in, the general, want for this product is, parents buying it for their kids? Or what have you kind of found that way, especially with like the D2C channels? Obviously you get a little bit more insights into who is actually buying.
Yeah.
So what have you kind of found as far as like, why the people are buying?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for us, we really are exploring and pushing into the white space between fruit snacks and fruit-based candy, right? Where if you look at those, we do explicitly target that millennial parent buying for themselves and for their kids. But the thing is that millennials are such a dominant cultural group that even though we skew the packaging and a lot of the messaging, to that millennial's kid, that still appeals to the millennial adult that still thinks of themselves in those youthful terms, right? It appeals to their parents that are looking at their grandkids, right? It appeals to the Gen Zers that are a little bit younger, but remember that youthful feeling from 5 years ago. So, I think just because you target a customer archetype, you can still do it in such a way that invites others to aspire to that archetype, right? And so that's our approach. So yeah, millennial families, 100% is the core target. But we want to build it to be accessible for anyone that likes fruit snacks, and you'll see that in our actual product forms, right? So what we love to do is we take heavily anchored, backboarded, nostalgic product forms. Easy example is our candy dots. The buttons of colored sugar on white paper.
I forgot about those. Yeah.
It's heavily anchored. Almost every American knows exactly what I'm talking about, even though you probably haven't bought any in 10 years, right? So we take that very nostalgic form and then we update it to be 100% modern ingredients, modern packaging, all those things. So, no added sugar, no crappy dye, no, it's just 100% fruit, good for you, feel good about it. And now you're saying like, oh, I remember this cool form. Maybe my grandparents bought it for me at the general store, the penny candy, whatever. Now I can buy it for my grandkids, or I can buy it for myself or my kids to share this cool nostalgic form with ingredients that I actually feel good about. That's our core value prop, and that's the customer that we try to capture.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I love how seemingly clear you are on that. I mean, it seems like this was given a great deal of thought beforehand, which I also think is really important. How you want your product placed out there, and how it's coming across to people who aren't buying it for themselves, but the very much variable sex of people who are buying it for kids, whether they're grandkids or parents, and what generation they're in. So that's really interesting and well thought out, I think. And let me ask you just one couple last things.
Sure.
One thing I ask everybody that comes on the podcast, if you watch any of mine, you'll see that I always ask this question. So if you go back to the beginning, the inception of the brand, like launch day, knowing everything you know now, everything you've learned along the way with working with farmers and owning your own manufacturing, if you can go back and give yourself one piece of advice, business, personal, whatever it is, since the beginning, what do you think that piece of advice would be?
Think bigger, faster. I think when you're starting out, sometimes, and some people think too big, but in general, I think you think too small. And what I've learned is that, more and more, you only get what you ask for, right? So like if you do a $10,000 Kickstarter campaign, you're probably going to raise $10,000. It's almost everybody. The reality is, as crazy as that sounds, almost everybody has a $10,000 Kickstarter in them. Right? Between your network, your family, your friends, whatever. Not everybody, but most people trying to start a business, they have a $10,000 Kickstarter in them. But the difference between a $10,000 Kickstarter and a $100,000, pitch competition, fundraising, going out there and talking to larger funders, it's not that much more work. It's not 10 times the work to go out and find $100,000 to do that launch right, instead of $10,000 from your friends and family and everybody, blah, 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 to put together that table at the farmer's market. So, you have, it's hard to do that, but really challenging yourself to see what steps are leading to instead of just the steps that you can take, right? See what you want to get to, and dream big, go try to do it as fast and as big as you can. And if you fail, you can always retreat back to that $10,000 Kickstarter. It's okay.
Yeah, no, it's such good advice, and I think anybody like starting as an entrepreneur, I think they have that in them. Like when they start, they're like, I can take on anything. I want to dream huge, and you do at the beginning, and then you get into kind of like the daily grind of things. And it's just like, well, like man, I got 80 hours of stuff. Like the next 3 days, all these other things. It's like, but no, it's such good advice though. I mean, you got to stay on top of those things. You need the funding. I mean, that's where most businesses I think go wrong. Whatever the statistic
Absolutely.
is, 75% of businesses fail in their first year. I think most of it is probably capital. So the advice to think bigger from a capital raising standpoint in the early stages is actually a pretty unique answer to that I've not heard before, but I think it's really, really awesome advice, so I definitely appreciate that. And last thing, Evan, I just want to give you an opportunity to shout out your website, your social media, anything, any ways people can stay in touch with the brand and yourself. Maybe anybody interested in a potential partnership, just let everybody know how to stay in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Peacefulfruits.com. We're out there on the website, on all the social medias, Instagram, Facebook, etc. It's just Peaceful Fruits. We're pretty unique. So very, very Googleable. Go on Amazon, check out the product, just a 5-star review, look for us in stores. We're in about 2,000 stores now. So growing every day. Appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, Evan. I really appreciate your time and your insights. It's a really awesome conversation. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Glad to talk, Matt. Thank you.
Thanks, Evan. Thanks, everybody.
Um,